Today I'm going to walk you through the steps for creating a new Omni silhouette. This is to basically create the 3D version of the file that you're looking at right now. These are the older ones that were set up by a third-party company, and so now we need some new styles, and we have to actually get ready and make them. So let's start taking a look at what we need to do to get that to work. The first thing is I've set up a new folder here with a couple of files. You don't need much to get this started. This OmniCheer lighting setup Blender file. I'm going to put that on the network, and it should be accessible to you. That's basically has all the camera and the lighting. And if we all use the same one, then that way, as we update things and change things around or figure out new ways to do it, we'll all have a place where we can get something that's consistent. So that's really all you need. I also have a test here. Thank you, Allie. This is the Omni female avatar, and it's got some garments in it that she set up. So I'm going to be using those as a test. And this is actually just some test artwork to set up the artwork in the end. But you guys will have artwork from the designers that you can actually use to set up. So let's start taking a look here. The first thing you want to do is you want to open up your Marvelous Designer project. And here I have it open. I've deleted out all the extra garments that were in here. So I only have the one that I'm going to be exporting. On the right hand side, you can see the UV editor. When I opened this file, I noticed that the UV garment pieces were actually situated all in the center. So that's not going to work when we go to export it. They need to be moved so that they're in the right spot. So let's go ahead and start by doing that. So basically what we want to do is, let me zoom out a little bit. There's numbers here on this grid in the UV editor, Marvelous Designer. Basically, you want all your stuff to fit between the 0 and 1 box. So 0 and 1 on the y-axis, and 0 and 1 on the x-axis. So you can scale these, you can move them around, you can rotate them. For the most part, I like to try and maintain the same scale with all of the pieces, at least so there's some kind of connection between them. And that if you scale them all in the same way, then that also means that all the artwork is scaled in the same way, and it's not going to be pixelated on one sleeve or on the front or anything like that. So as you can see, all the pieces, I've moved all the pieces around so that they kind of fit between 0 and 1. Just a quick tidbit to think about. I've left a little bit of space over here in the bottom right corner. LiquidPixels, when it goes through and sets up the artwork, it actually wants you to specify a area where it can set up space for an inside texture. So basically the inside color of the garment. And that's actually what I'm leaving, just a little bit over here in the bottom right hand corner. But yeah, so we got everything set up and it's all ready to go. We don't need the avatar. We can either turn her off here so we don't see her, or we can do that in the export settings. But it looks like for right now we've got everything set the way we want. You may want to do a quick double check. Select everything. You may want to do a quick double check of your particle distance to make sure it's set to something like between 5 and 10. So that you get a smooth mesh when you export it over to Blender. So, but everything looks good here. I'm going to go ahead and go to my export window. So I'm going to go to export and export object. It's already pointed at my garment video folder here. So I'm going to name this test top. And I'm going to click save. And so it's going to give me my export options. Now there's a few just to be aware of here. First of all, you want to select all the patterns. You don't want any avatars, and for right now we don't want any graphics or trims. As we evolve here, maybe we'll figure out ways that we can use those, but for right now we're just going to make it as simple as possible and steer clear of those. You want a single object, you want it welded together, and thin, not thick, so we don't want any actual thickness to the mesh. You want the UV coordinates turned on, and PNG is fine. 4096 pixels is what I've been using, so you get a nice big texture when you export this. And really, we're not going to be using anything other than this normal map. I've turned all the other ones off, metal and roughness and opacity. I've turned all of those off. I'm going to keep it in the diffuse map just in case we'd have like color or different areas we'd need to be able to select in there. But really, the only thing we really need is the normal map. So I'm just going to scroll down, make sure everything else is the same. Scale, let's keep it at millimeters for right now. For this one, I know it's different for the gymnastics avatar and gymnastics styles, but for this one, we're going to do millimeters, and everything else looks just fine. So we're going to click OK, and then you can kind of see down here at the bottom corner, it's baking the images and exporting the object, and it actually looks like we're done. So I'm going to close Marvelous Designer, and I'm not going to save that because I don't really need it for anything else now. And let's go back to our Finder window, and now you can see it's put a couple of different things in here. We have the diffuse image, which is just, like I said before, basically your color. And there's also this normal map. It looks kind of odd. It's just a couple of lines on this blue background, but what it does is it adds in certain textures and certain lighting effects that you may have set up in Marvelous Designer. Specifically, what it does for us is it actually adds the seams, and it tells where to bend the light to add those seams back into the Blender file. No, I don't want to save. Okay, so and then we have the material thing. It's basically the materials from Marvelous Designer, and we also have our object. So now we want to go ahead and open up that OmniCheer lighting setup, and I believe I already have that open. Yep. Now what you're looking at is actually the setup file opened up. There may already be a garment in here. If so, you can just click on it and hit X to delete it. You're also, I just want to let everybody know that this is Blender 3.0. If it looks different or it acts different, you may be on a lower version, but it should still work just fine. If you have any issues, just let me know and I can save this down and set one up in the lower model, the lower versions, so that we can all use it. So let me go ahead, and the first thing I want to do is bring in that object. So we're going to go here. It's already pointed to the right folder. The desktop OBJ file is what we want, and just click OK, or import object. And right off the bat, you'll notice that it didn't look like it did anything. But I can see desktop up here in my layers. First thing I'm going to do is move that into the model layer, so it's on its own thing, separate from the camera and everything else. But it is there. It's just really, really large. And this might be something we have to work out later on. I don't know if anybody can actually see it, but it's way up here in the corner. It's just really, really big. So let's bring that down to a more manageable size. And for these garments and the way that the avatar was set up, I've found that a scale of 0.01 works best. So with your desktop model selected and you go into your object properties, you can go right down here to scale and type in 0.01 for X, Y, and Z. And that will bring it right down to the size you want. Even if you look at it in the camera view, you can see it's exactly where we need it. Central, everything's good to go, and it's all like set up exactly right. Just to make sure everything else works fine from here on out, I'm going to apply that scale just so it sets it back to 1. So I'm going to do that by hitting Command A and apply the scale. And basically you can see what that does is it sets that to 1. What it does is for future animations and any other kind of modifiers and anything like that, it actually just gives it a base of 1 so that it does everything. It makes sure that everything kind of works the way you expect it to work instead of using the larger scale and then computing it all down. It's pretty technical, but hopefully that makes some sense. So now that we've got it in here, there's a few things we need to do. As you can kind of see, and let me turn off some of these, like the camera layers and the lighting, so we can kind of just look at our garment here for a second. There's a couple of things. So we exported this as a thin garment. So right off the bat, you can tell just by looking at it, it is just that, it's thin. There's no like thickness to it. And actually, I'm gonna make this white so that we can see the shape a little bit better. Hopefully that will do it here. All right. Of course not. That would be too easy. We're going to just swap out texture for the basic white fabric, and now you can kind of see it a little bit better here. There's there's no actual edge to it at all. It's just it's just the white mesh. So the first thing we want to do is we want to add some thickness to it, and we're going to do that by using a modifier. The modifier we want, so you want to select your top, and the modifier we want to use is Solidify. And it looks like my settings are already right, but you can kind of see here that it actually has put an edge right on it. All the way there, there's a front and a back to that now. The settings I used were simple. The thickness is only 0.01 meters, I think that is. And I don't know what the default offset is, but this is the -1, which means it's going to go inside the mesh that we already had, not outside the mesh that we already had. Make sure your fill is on there in order to get that actual edge on the side, and that should be good to go. But we have a slight problem in the fact that what this modifier does is it puts an inside and it puts a outside facing normal, which if you know what a normal is, it's basically the way that the pattern is bouncing off of the front of this garment. But it also puts a normal inside, so it's facing this way too. So when we go to apply our liquid pixel texture, it's repeating the outside on the inside, which is bad, because when we go to set up our sublimation patterns on the outside, it's also going to repeat the sublimation pattern on the inside. So you don't want to see that pattern on the inside of the final garment. So we're going to undo that liquid pixel texture real quick. So what we need to do is we actually are going to make a copy of the test top. We're going to do that with Shift D, and you can see it duplicates it, but if you hit escape, it puts it right back in the exact same spot. So Shift D and escape will just make a complete duplicate of what you've got. And just to keep myself from going crazy, I'm going to actually rename these. We're going to make the original one the exterior, and I'm going to name the new one interior. Okay, so they occupy the same space. They're the exact same size, so obviously you're not going to see one as opposed to the other. So we need to fix that a little bit. The first thing we need to do is we need to make sure we've got the interior one selected, and we need to turn off the Solidify because we don't need that on the inside. We just need an inside mesh so that we can color it the right way. But we do need what we call a displace modifier, and as you can see, we get like a very marshmallow looking result right off the bat. So these two measurements work together, the Solidify and the displace modifiers. So basically we want our mid-level to be 0. And it got even bigger. But what we want to do is we want to shift it in the direction of what we call the normal, which again is those outward facing arrows. They literally go out from the garment, telling it where to put the texture. And you can see them, just for a quick aside. Maybe you can't see them on this view. No, it doesn't look like you can turn them on here. You can turn them on in some of the other views, just to kind of take a look at where they point to. But for right now, we don't need to do that. But what we do need to do is we need to flip this inside out so that the normals are pointing in, not out. So again, make sure you got your interior selected and tab to go into your edit mode, and it's gonna shrink it back to the normal way. Don't freak out, it just doesn't show you the modifier in the edit mode. So you've got everything in that one selected. If not, you can just hit A and select all of it. And then go to your mesh, go to your normals, and click flip. Now it doesn't look like it actually did a darn thing, but when you go outside by hitting tab again, you leave edit mode, you can see now the shape is a little different. So now we need to tweak that. And so when we used 0.015 mil for our Solidify, we're going to do the same thing here, but we're going to add just a little bit extra. So we're going to go 0.1016 mil. And we did that, and now you can kind of see, I don't know if you can see it on your screen, but you can see that it's just inside. What we can do to kind of test that is go ahead and select your interior, and where it's set for the basic white fabric, set it for something else. There should be an interior texture in this file, and you can kind of see that it's changed. Now it's a little different. Let me show you something drastically different so that we can kind of take a look. Let's switch it to our LiquidPixel texture. So there you go. You can see that now that inside is totally different from the outside. You may need to go a little bit more if you have like some artifacts in here or something else showing through. You could take it, maybe take this modifier and go up maybe another one, or even a 0.165, just to kind of make sure that everything is inside that Solidify. But this will give you an inside to the outside and an inside and an outside. Okay, so now that we have an inside and an outside, what we want to do is we want to combine this, so we're only working with one object. So the way we're going to do that is there's a couple of steps. First thing we want to do is we want to apply these modifiers so that it saves out what we did and we don't have to worry with them anymore. So for the interior one, you take the displace modifier and go ahead and apply it. Should look no different. It should just make sure that it's set. For the exterior one, go ahead and apply the Solidify modifier. Again, shouldn't look any different. Everything should be the same. The next thing you want to do is click the interior and the exterior, make sure both are highlighted there, and you want to join them. That on the Mac is Command, and you have to be in the 3D window, or your mouse has to be over the 3D window, Command J, and you can see it literally made one object out of everything we just did. So now we're only dealing with one thing, which is a lot easier. But just to save us some headache down the road, if you click on your materials, you can now see both materials are in there and they're assigned to selected pieces of the mesh. When we start switching out the different fabrics and different textures for this mesh, we want to make sure we still have the ability to assign the inside and the outside to different things. So the first thing we need to do is we need to go have your object selected and go into your edit mode. Okay, click on the background to deselect everything, and then grab either the white basic fabric or the magic liquid pixel, or whatever the inside or outside. Just make sure you know which one you're clicking on. So I'm going to click the magic liquid pixel, and I'm going to click select. So now you can see I've only got the inside piece of that mesh selected. What I want to do is click on the, what is this called? The object data properties. And in this vertex groups, I want to assign a vertex group. So I'm going to make this the interior. And I'm going to click assign. And I'm also going to lock it. just so it doesn't get changed. You can make sure that this actually worked by clicking the deselect and select button. Make sure it's getting what you expect it to get. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the white basic fabric. Make sure it's not selected anything. Select the white basic fabric. Go back to your vertex groups and create the exterior group. Now we may actually not wind up using this, but it's always good to have this as a backup just in case you would need to change something later on. For the most part, you should be able to access these via this menu with the different fabrics, but if you would do something, and set both of them to the same thing, this will ensure that you don't have to go back and select all of those points by hand, which is not something you want to have to do. So, all right, so we've basically gotten our garment in, we've got it scaled, we've put an interior inside of it, we've got everything set, and so at this point, we're ready to kind of take a look at the UVs. Make sure that they're set right, and then we can start rendering stuff out. So the first thing we're going to do is go into our UV editing, and I'm actually going to go through it through this screen. I'm just going to switch this over to our UV editor. And so you can go into edit mode in your 3D window here, and if you grab everything, you can see like our UVs are set the exact same way they were in Marvelous Designer. We've got the front, the back, and the two sleeves. But when we made a second copy of this and put it inside the other one, what it actually did is there's two copies here. So let's select just the inside, which for me is this magic liquid pixel texture. So I'm going to select that, and you can see I've got front, back, and two sleeves there. But in my UV window, I'm going to go ahead and select all of that. You can either drag around that. You can also hit A, and it will select everything. And then I'm going to scale and move that off just a little bit. You can do that by S will scale, G will move things, just like in the regular Blender window. So I'm going to make this a lot smaller, and I'm going to move this whole piece right off of our texture. Okay, so now when I go back into the 3D window and I select everything, now you can see both the outside, which is what we've got here, and the inside, which is what we've got shrunk down over here. Now remember, when we were in Marvelous Designer, I said you wanted to leave a little bit of room in this lower left corner or lower right corner or wherever you really have room so that we can shade the interior. Well, that's exactly where I'm going to put all of these right now. So I'm going to select those and move them just in this lower right corner. And basically what'll happen now on, we're going to export this as our template so we can set up our artwork. When we put in the information into data files, we're going to tell LiquidPixel to make a box right here. And it's going to make a gray box, and you've probably seen it in some of the older pieces of artwork, the older templates for Omni sublimation. It's going to make a gray box right there, and then that piece is going to get put inside here when it goes to set everything up. But it needs to know where to put it, so that's why we need to do this here. Now that that's set up, you want to go ahead and select everything, make sure everything's selected so you can see all of it, and go to UV and go to Export UV Layout. And I'm going to save that. Yep, that's in our folder. I'm going to put that, just put it somewhere where you can make sure you can get to it later. And I'm going to name that UV Layout. And it's already a PNG file. It's already the right size, 2048 by 2048. And you want to make sure you go ahead and set it up pretty much the same way and export that. Should think about it for a second and then return you back to the window. So basically what we just did here is we set up a file that we can go back and use in Illustrator later on to set up our artwork. you can pull this image into Illustrator and use this information here to set yourself up shapes that you can use as clipping masks to set up our artwork. It's already done for you, and it makes it pretty easy. All right, so now we've got our garment in, we've got the interior set up, we've got the UVs straightened out and ready to go. So now we can start rendering things out. I'm not going to render everything out, and I will show you how to do that, but since it's time consuming, I'm only going to render out one, like the front of each one. This file, and if I go outside the edit mode and we turn some of the extra pieces back on, the camera, and we'll turn on the lighting, the accent lighting, you can kind of see that the way I've set this up is that for each keyframe, and you can see your keyframes down here, 0, 1, 2, and 3, there's a different view. So right now at 0, the camera is pointing directly at the front, and it's set up for the front view. But if we switch it over to 1, the camera now moves off to the left, the wearer's left, and the lighting also moves. So it's shifting the lighting and the camera for each different view. So we have, front, left, back, and right. And the way it does that is because then that way when you go up here and you go to render animation, it will go through each view, and you don't have to do that manually. It's all set up so it does that automatically for you, which makes it a whole lot easier to go ahead and render this out. So let's go ahead and render these out. The first thing we want to do is we want to do the lighting pass. What that is that's the really bright white version of these garments, and it's a basic white version. It's simple, and then that way that's basically what the artwork gets put on first. So there's a couple things we need to do. We want to make sure the accent lighting is completely on and make sure everything is set on there. And we also want to make sure this main lighting is turned on as well. You can preview this if you click on your viewport shading. It will show you exactly what it's going to render, and that looks pretty good. Although I still have my LiquidPixel textures set up inside there, so I'm going to select my garment, and I'm going to change. If you just highlight the one you want to change, you can go right down here to your drop-down box, and you can pick which texture you want. I'm going to go with the interior texture because that's something we set up so that the inside has like a slightly darker appearance than the outside. And so the inside is set to the interior texture, the outside is the white basic fabric. Now that should be correct. To go to your render settings, you want to make sure you're set up with the render settings for cycles. And then finally, you want to also, all the settings should be good to go here. You want to make sure it's 8-bit color depth for this render. And you also want to make sure that you go through and pick a spot on your hard drive. So I'm going to make sure that it's all going into my Omni new garment video. And I'm also going to make a folder, and I'm going to call it renders. So that's the folder it's going to put all this stuff in. I'm going to click accept, and you can see it down here as your output. And at this point, we can go ahead and render them out. So once everything is set and good to go, everything that you need is turned on or turned off. All you have to do is go up here and go to render and render animation. Just for the tutorial here, I'm going to go ahead and render this one image. And you can see as it renders over here, it's building, it's going to go through, it's going to do its passes, and it's basically going to render out the front. And it will save that as your, I think it's a 001 is the file name at the end. And basically you want to do that for each different kind of renders we've got here. So I'm going to stop that just for the purposes of the tutorial here, but it will save that as a file in that folder then. Once you get all of those it should be a 01, a 000, 001, 002, 003, and those correspond to your frames. So you have to make some renaming to front, back, side, front, back, left, and right. And you want to do that before you do the next render, because the next render is going to overwrite those files. So switch over to your folder, go through, rename your files, and then come back and we can do the next pass, which in this case is the shadow pass. So we're going to turn off the main lighting and we're going to turn on the shadow lighting, which is pretty much the same. It's just a little less, so that we see more of the shadows than in the main lighting version. So you want to do the same thing here. Make sure that your interior, exterior set everything. Your output can be the same. You got your shadow lighting turned on, your accent lighting is turned on, because this one should be on for all of the passes except for the gradient pass. So everything there is on, and then you can go to render and render animation again, and that will go through, render out all your files, and you can rename them. Then you can come back in here and turn the shadow lighting off, and what you're left with is accent lighting. But first thing we need to do before we render out the accent pass is we need to switch it over to a black fabric. And what that does is it actually it shows the super high highlights of the garment. So where it says white basic fabric, we're going to change both of these to the black accent fabric. And there's a couple different ways you can do that. You can either do what I did here and go into your materials properties and click on them here and change them with the drop down. If you're using Blender 3.0, you can actually drag these right onto the garment in the area you want them, and it should change them over. I don't know how well it will work with the interior texture there. You may still have to go into the properties to switch that over, but that makes it a little bit easier. And now you can see we've got the black garment with like an extreme white bright highlight behind it. So we're going to go ahead and render that one out, and we're going to name that, with the front, back, left, and right as well, just by doing your render animation, and then come back for the last pass. The final pass is the gradient pass, and this is completely different than the other three because it uses no light. So the first thing you want to do is turn all those off, so there's no lighting. You want to swap out either by dragging. Let's see if I can drag it into the background. Oh, I can. There we go. So I can drag it into the background, and I've got the textures applied to both the interior and the exterior. You can do it here also in the material properties. So you want the magic liquid pixel, everything is set. Our UVs are set so we know it's pointing in the right spots. And now we have to change our render settings. For this one, instead of cycles, we actually want to use Eevee, because it uses a different set of lighting rules that we need in order to make sure that this comes out the exact right way we want it. Everything should be set in the file, the Blender setup file, except for one thing. In the image settings, or the output properties, you want to change the color depth here to 16 and not 8. This is really important, and if you would wind up at the end of this process with an image that the artwork is pixelated and not looking like what you expect, you want to make sure that these gradient files are rendered out as 16 bits for the color depth. It's a LiquidPixel requirement, and that's the only way these work. So basically, then what you want to do is you want to go just like you normally. All the lighting is turned off. Everything is good to go. You've got your 16-bit color depth. You switched over to Eevee. And so you want to just go to render. And these should render really quickly. Render and render animation. And you can see it. It'll go through the front, the left, the back, and the sides. The front, the left, the back, and the right, rather. So at this point, you should have a folder with all of your files rendered out the exact way we need them. You're going to want to go ahead and change them I'm trying to think if there's anything else we need to do in Blender. That should be everything we need to do in Blender. You can either save this as an alternative file, like if you want to save it under the style name somewhere, so we have it. If you have to go back and make adjustments, that's totally fine. But yeah, you can save this. I'm not going to save this particular window. I'm just going to exit, and you can see I only did the one render. But here's what it should look like. You should have your 0, your 1, 2, and 3. And then you're just going to want to rename them using the LiquidPixel renaming convention. You can look on the LiquidPixel server if you need help with that. And let me get to, let's go to OC sub. And we'll take a look at what those are. So in products, you can see I've set up these test top, and these are the files that I rendered out from Blender. So you've got test top, left, front, back, and right, L, F, B, and R, and accent. These are the accent pass. They have the black fabric and the lighting behind it. And then we go on to the shadows. Shadow pass, like I said, it's a little darker, has a little bit more shadow to it. Then we go to the lighting passes, which are brighter to put the artwork on. And finally, you've got the gradient passes. So all of those have been renamed according to the naming convention, which is the style, a dash, the front, back, left, or right, F, B, L, or R, a dash, and then what kind of file it is, gradient, lighting, shadows, or accent. So all of those get put in the products folder in the OC subfolder on the LiquidPixel server. There's a couple of other things you're going to have to edit in order to make everything work. First of all, the designs folder is where you're going to put your artwork once you go through Illustrator and set it all up and then export it the way you've set up all the other ones. You can use that template that we saved the PNG UV layout. Open that up in Illustrator, import it in, and live trace it as a silhouette, and it will give you a good clipping mask that you can use to set up your artwork in the right spot. For the interior ones, you can actually take those out of the Illustrator file because we're going to tell it where we want it to put our box. If you want, you can literally draw a box in there, and then that way you can use those values in Illustrator to put it in the data table. So you can kind of see here, we've got the test top, we've got textures, color 1, color 2, color 3, just the way you would normally set them up. And they go into designs. So we got the style, the design name, texture, and then color 1, color 2, color 3, and so on and so forth. Also, there's a couple other things you need to add, and that's in the data section. So data, OC sub, inner textures. And hopefully that should open up here in my code editor. Eventually. Looks like there was another update. And there it is. Okay, so this is where we tell it where to put the box for the inside textures. And I got these values straight out of Illustrator. The 94, 94, 94 is a gray color, and that can stay the same for all of these. But this is your width in pixels, your height in pixels, your X and Y coordinates of the top left corner. So when you go into Illustrator and you draw a box in the spot where you want it to cover all of those inside pieces, all you have to do is get the height and width right from the top, the values right in Illustrator, and then the X and Y coordinates, but make sure that you change the point to the upper left corner instead of the center, because Illustrator likes to move everything to the center. And if you have any questions, I can show you how to do that. It's pretty easy. So put your values in here with the tabs between them, and that should be good to go. Just save that file when you get your stuff updated, and then you'll need two more things, I believe. You'll need to create a design colors locations table for your particular silhouette, and basically I just took a long top and copied the information and took out everything else, put my design in there and my silhouette name, and saved it with the right name. This will be something we can come back to later on, and we can adjust all these values to make sure that the embellishments are in the right spot. But for right now, you just need something in there in order to make sure that it's actually going to visualize properly. So you have to create that, and it's pretty much just a copy from an old one, or another one rather. The Skew texture mapping table. This is something LiquidPixel uses. I don't really know exactly what it does. I think it's if you want to be able to change names of things to make them something else. But basically, you'll have to go through and you have to put your style name in here just the way these are set up. So, so for my style, it was called Test Top, and I just put Test Top again, and that was all that I needed in there. That's the Skew texture mapping table. And then finally, the design color layers table. You may have seen this before. This tells it how many colors are actually in your design. I think in my design, I had 3 colors. Let's go to art and sub and designs and sort. So yeah, I have 1, 2, 3 colors. So at the bottom here, I added a new one with my style and my design, style dash design name, and 1, 2, and 3. Now, if you would run your design later on and you find out that color 2 really needs to be on top of color 3, or rather, color 3 needs to be on top of color 2, you could go in here and you could switch the order. So that it'll swap those out without you having to rename the files, but it's just as easy to rename the files too. So I try to keep everything in numerical order as much as possible. So you'll have to add your design and your thing in design color layers table. And once you get all of those tables in, all your artwork pieces are in, and all your base pieces are in, you should be able to go to your Chrome or Safari or web browser URL and put in your style name and your design name and your colors. Make sure you have enough colors to cover however many colors you have in the URL, and it should pop up. At that point, you can kind of start troubleshooting to see what's going wrong, what's working, what's not working, and kind of go from there. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, email or Slack, or call me or text me, whatever you need. So hopefully this is helpful. If I need to do a second piece on the Illustrator pieces, editing the Illustrator artwork, just let me know and I can go ahead and set one of those up too. But hopefully this works out for you guys and it helps you out. Let me know if you need anything. Thank you.